Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and tweet this out. Where is the... Is it share? Okay, I guess it's this, right? Reschedule. It's wrong. Okay. So today I am going to be going over the Neoteric Marxism debate between Anarchat and socialism done left. Now, this is a very interesting debate purely because of the new theory that we're going through over here. This is honestly one of the first times that that this subgenre of anarchist thought has really been brought to the public mainstream. I'm going to go ahead and start with playback, and I have some notes over here on the side that I'm going to refer to.
I probably have like 3D diagnosis on the DSM-5, and so has everyone else that has written on Neoteric Marxism. But that's besides the point.
Okay.
Let me know if the volume's good.
So, Neoteric Marxism is quite the interesting ideology, I think.
If you had to summarize what Neoteric Marxism is before we get into it too much, in one or two sentences, what is the thesis of Neoteric Marxism?
It's Marxism, but flipped on its head.
Okay.
I think that's a good way to put it.
So what gets flipped?
So I was watching your stream right before you got me on. I saw you read the manifest.
So I'm gonna stop it right here. This guy doesn't do a particularly great job of answering this question. The question was, describe Neoteric Marxism in one or two sentences. Marxism flipped on its head would be just like capitalism. Instead of the proletariat enslaving the bourgeois just enslaves the proletariat. That's just capitalism. So the answer to what is Neoteric Marxism is the absolvement or destruction of the proletariat through any means. Socialism in general seems to has the goal, you could say, of undermining the bourgeois and their place of power. So Neoteric Marxism merely seeks to do the inverse. It's not the opposite, it's the inverse. There's a very key difference there, and it is worth noting the difference.
So,
I read it beforehand, but I was just showing people.
Yeah, I know. What gets flipped really is the class conflict. Instead.
Okay, I have to stop it here again. You can't flip class conflict. The class conflict is exactly the same. The difference lies in outcome. The war between the proletariat and the bourgeois is the same. We don't advocate for anything different there. As Neoteric Marxists, we merely advocate for we advocate for the same class conflict. We advocate for a different outcome. We advocate for the bourgeoisie winning instead of the proletariat winning. It's a I think most people understood what you meant here. It's a very minor difference, but it is worth noting purely from like a theory perspective that this is considered an oversight.
Of destroying the bourgeoisie, the idea is that you destroy the proletariat. And if you destroy the proletariat, according to the theory, what will happen is that only the bourgeoisie is left. And if only the bourgeoisie is left, what theoretically would happen, and there's really no proof of that, is that the bourgeois collapses too.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of communism is...
Okay, so he's right here. The goal of Marxism and socialism in general is to take what we have of the status quo, which is capitalism, and we have two classes of the capitalism, or under capitalism, and then we seek to take that over to a dictatorship of a proletariat where we have one class, right, because we eliminate the bourgeois, and then eventually, once we achieve a dictatorship of a proletariat on a global level, we can undermine even that and result in a world with zero classes, right? And so this is something that Marx and Engels touched on in the Communist Manifesto. The Marxian view is such a bourgeois socialist is the sustainer of a current state of bourgeois class relations. Opinions vary as to whether this or that bourgeois socialist intentionally is excusing the current order, but the common thread is the objective fact that they are preserving it. So this is the bourgeois harnessing the mechanism of socialism in order to further their own ends. So we know that the bourgeois are capable of hijacking this this notion of equality through socialism, and they hijack it in such a way as to undermine capitalism while still maintaining power. And so this is similar to what we actually try to do as Neoteric Marxists. Now, what's important to note here is that so when we talk about Marxism traditionally in the sense of capitalism, then a dictatorship of a proletariat, and then communism, Neoteric Marxism deviates from that traditional approach to Marxism by saying that we should once again start with two classes, but then instead of going to a dictatorship of the proletariat, we go into a dictatorship of the bourgeois. From there, it is a very small additional step to go into that this notion of communism. So either way, we get the same outcome. We get communism. This is something that Shaw will touch on in a second here, but we get communism. We start with capitalism and we end with communism either way. The only difference is whether the bourgeois or the proletariat wins the class war. And traditionally Marxists support the proletariat, but we can actually achieve the same outcome of communism much easier simply through attaching ourselves to the bourgeois instead of to the proletariat.
A classless society, of course. So, yeah.
Sure. So I guess the question then becomes, so let's say that we like the idea of collapsing capitalism and getting to communism. Let's say that we, no disagreement there. How do we get to the one-class state where we destroy the proletariat? What do we got to do to destroy the proletariat?
by hijacking the neoliberal state, there's multiple ways to do that. That's usually known as like upstream Neoteric Marxism. There's another kind that's weirder, that's called downstream Neoteric Marxism, which is
How has an ideology
another
with
deal.
like 10 adherents split already?
Okay, so this is a misconception, I guess, on the part of socialism done left as to the splits within socialism. There are plenty of pretty, I guess you would call them minor splits within socialism. So, we have Marxism, Leninism, Trotskyism, Stalinism, right? I don't know who stands. I don't know why people support Stalin, but apparently a few of them exist. Bad take. Don't do that. So for us, it's Engels. Engels was, as we can see here, Engels was undeniably bourgeois, right? Frederick Engels, a wealthy capitalist and partner in a big textile firm, was bourgeois. This is pretty common knowledge for a lot of Marxists, right? This idea that the bourgeois can support and help bring about communism. And we believe that how they do that is by you could, well, there's two ways. One is this traditional accelerationist notion of the bourgeois help make the conditions so bad for the proletariat that they cause a revolution and uprising and crush the bourgeois. But really, the opposite is true as well. There's no reason why, if we get our, I think socialists tend to be fairly competent and tend to be fairly capable of success within capitalism. There's this narrative that people are only socialists because they suck at capitalism, and I don't really think that's true. Really, quite a good number of socialists are quite capable of surviving within capitalism, to a large extent, even more than the standard worker. And so, by elevating ourselves to the bourgeois, we can establish a position where we maintain our same goals, where we don't lose this goal of establishing communism. All that changes is we now have more power within the system to influence it. More importantly, we can achieve the same outcome, communism, in an easier way by destroying the proletariat instead of destroying the bourgeois. This doesn't have to be destruction. I'll touch on this a bit later in the video, but this is not a Passadist view. There's a decent number of ways you can look at this. You can look at it from a Passadist lens, but by no means do you have to.
What are you doing?
Well, it's not split. It's one struggle. It's just different ways to look at how to do it.
Okay. So what's upstream Neoteric Marxism?
Well, the goal of upstream Neoteric Marxism is more standard. It's more of uplifting the proletariat by hijacking the state. The downstream is like destroying the means of production in order to destroy the proletariat.
Okay, so in upstream proletariat, you said it was what, uplifting the proletariat? Did I mishear?
Yeah.
So how do we uplift the proletariat?
You understood. Well, an example of how to do it is with radical Yangist thought.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry if my pronunciation is a bit off. My first language is French.
No worries.
But-
We got two in a row, apparently.
But yeah, I noticed. which is by taking Andrew Yang's policies of like UBI, you take those policies and you take them to an extreme, to a level where every member of the proletariat is able to get themselves hold over a means of production. And if that happens,
So this is a expansion on the ideas of liberalism. Liberalism is, while the core goal of liberalism is good, liberalism ultimately fails in its goal. So liberalism seeks to maximize personal liberty. We saw this is what brought down the my dog's barking. Jojo, I'll be right back. Alright, I'm just gonna close the door and ignore her. So this is what brought about the end of feudalism, right? So this notion of people other than just the ruling class should be able to own private property. And liberalism ultimately failed in this remark. While individuals under capitalism can own personal property and can hypothetically own private property, that's simply not the reality of what we see. So you don't see workers going out and buying like factories or whatever. This is something that's only relegated to the upper classes. Actual control over the means of production is something that no working individual has any substantive sway over. So then a lot of times what people will do after acknowledging that liberalism has failed in its goal is to defer to libertarianism. And this is better. Libertarianism, in the same way, seeks to maximize personal liberty. But libertarianism, once again, fails. Now we're getting into less concrete examples here, but there's a good number of arguments against this notion of right libertarianism, and a lot of it is very compelling. The general Marxist view of right libertarianism is that without trying to maintain capitalism without a state will just draw us back into neo-feudalism, right? Instead of being instead of living in a world where the government and corporations have all the power in the world, we will live in not the government and the corporations, but the bourgeois and the corporations. We will instead live in a world where just the corporations have power. And really that's not what we want to happen. And so it's very clear then that libertarianism is not the way forward for to maximize personal freedoms. And so really what we see then is this idea of Neoteric Marxism being the way forward, where we can liberate we can liberate society as a whole through the absolvement of the proletariat and the lower classes in general.
In theory, what will happen if everyone has the means of production, like we said before,
and everyone's bourgeois?
Proletariat. Yeah, and if everyone is bourgeois, in theory, what happens is that no one is bourgeois.
So to me, this sure sounds a lot like market socialism or mutualism. Like, hey.
Okay, so, well, I'll play a few more seconds.
We want to bring the poor up and the rich down, and then everyone now is either a bourgeois or a worker. We're all the one class. We've compressed all the classes into one. So is upstream Neoteric Marxism just like market socialism, but edgy?
Okay, so the answer to this is no. We'll see what Shah says here, and then I can have my response.
You can see it like that if you want.
Okay, this is a bad answer. Upstream Neoteric Marxism is not market socialism. Market socialism falls under this general umbrella of libertarianism. Now, granted, not right libertarianism. Market socialism is undeniably left libertarian, but it is undoubtedly still it still fits under this libertarian ideal. And as we've established, libertarianism is just like liberalism part 2 electric boogaloo, right? It's destined to fail in the same way that liberalism failed, which is that in theory, individuals can own private property, but that's never something that we're going to see. We're only going to see them owning personal property, right? So right after this debate, I actually tweeted out, I said, you should have mentioned how upstream Neoteric Marxism is different because market socialism requires the maintenance of the proletariat to succeed. This is the primary difference between upstream Neoteric Marxism and market socialism, right? Basically, the explanation is that market socialism gives power to the workers. Upstream Neoteric Marxism makes exploitation of the proletariat impossible since there are no workers left. In upstream Neoteric Marxism, there are no workers, there are only owners. Under market socialism, everyone is both a worker and an owner. There's a key distinction here. Basically, under capitalism, there's a group of people who are doing the exploiting, and there's a group of people who are being exploited, right? The bourgeois and the proletariat. Market socialism aims to intertwine these two by having everyone be the owner and by everyone being the worker. Everyone is only exploiting themselves. And so that results in there being essentially no exploitation. Under upstream Neoteric Marxism, then, we see this, we see everyone being the owner and no one being the worker. Not only does it show the hypocrisy of a bourgeois, it also means that society will ultimately downfall from capitalism. And, of course, the reason for this is because in a world where everyone's doing the exploiting and no one's being exploited, that's a unsustainable world, right? So this world will inevitably fall, and that would bring about the end of the end of the dictatorship of the bourgeois. So so in the class war, what we see is the bourgeois are always fighting for more and more power. No matter how much power the proletariat gives away to the bourgeois always wants more. So what we do then under the dictatorship of the bourgeois is we give them all the power, and we expose how when the bourgeois have all the power, that's a fundamentally unsustainable society. The bourgeois, don't get me wrong, cannot exist without the proletariat. And so by removing the proletariat, we expose not only the true intentions of the bourgeois, but also their inability to function without us.
Okay.
Sure.
So then downstream Neoteric Marxism.
Oh, that's a bit more.
Okay, I also want to, before we move on to downstream Neoteric Marxism, I want to address the upstream Neoteric Marxism just very briefly more. The reason why we support, we as Neoteric Marxists support the bourgeois in their effort to undermine the proletariat is because we've been trying to establish socialism by giving power to the proletariat for forever. And it's clearly not working, at least not in America. And I would say in most parts of the world, this is not something that will work. There's some Latin American countries where you legitimately can achieve a dictatorship of the proletariat through giving power to the workers. But that's not something that can be done in so many other places around the globe. And so if the proletariat cannot win the class war, then the only two other options are either A, we draw out the class conflict, leading to an infinite stage of capitalism, basically, or B, we secede all power to the bourgeois, and the bourgeois establishes their dictatorship of the bourgeois. And this is at this point, this dictatorship of the bourgeois, if that's something we can achieve on a global level, then there will be no choice but for us to fall back into communism as a dictatorship of the bourgeois, as I've touched on previously, is inherently unsustainable. There is no world in which this works. This being like the bourgeois being able to maintain power. Once we give them power, they have more power than they already have. They have no option but to accept their downfall. There is nothing they can do, because they will have no one left to exploit. And this is something that's shared between upstream Neoteric Marxism and downstream Neoteric Marxism. Both branches seek to absolve or destroy the proletariat. Upstream seeks to absolve it, downstream seeks to destroy it. And we're gonna, for most of the rest of this video, we're gonna touch on downstream Neoteric Marxism.
Well, that's a bit weird. So the idea is that if you destroy the means of production, there of course there won't be means of production, right? We can agree on that. And the class system we exist on is dependent on the class relations. So if you destroy the means of, we live in a class system that is built around the means of production, right?
Sure.
So when you destroy the means of production, what happens basically is that the proletariat is destroyed, and so is the bourgeoisie.
Sure. How do we actually destroy the means of production, though? Like, are we talking physical destruction? Is this like Possadism? Is this accelerationism? What is this?
There's a variation of downstream Neoteric Marxism, which is literally Possadism. And there's...
Okay, I just want to point this out very briefly. Possadism stole this from us, make no mistake about it. This notion of Possadism, right, is undeniably within the framework of downstream Neoteric Marxism. This is something that Possadists will claim to have arrived at independently, but by like bombing the capitalists or whatever. But this idea they have of that's similar to accelerationism through perpetuating conflict against capitalists is actually something they stole from us as Neoteric Marxists. Of course, we seek to antagonize the workers, right? Traditionally, socialists seek to antagonize the bourgeois. Neoteric Marxists seek to antagonize the proletariat, and Posadists seek to antagonize capitalists in general, right? So this is undeniably, like, there's no two ways about it. This is absolutely 100% something that they stole from us in our notion of how to bring about communism. Now, that's fine. Like, there's not a problem with basing your ideas off of other branches of Marxism. I just wish Posadists would be a little more upfront about where they get their theory and their ideas from. This is an idea that they got from us. There's no other way to go about it.
How is there a split of a split?
Neoteric Marxism.
It's because to me, this sure just sounds like either Posadism, like, hey, we need to nuke the entire world. It's time to get to real communism because there's no production anymore. Or two, it's anarcho-primitivism. We need to destroy industrial society and return to monkey.
Well, you predicted it. It's the other way of doing it.
Okay, how can there be a split of a split? This is really a quite severe misconception on socialism done left's part. Apparently, socialism done left has never heard of Trotskyism. He's never heard of Maoism. Trotskyism and Maoism are both splits of Leninism, which in it itself is a split of Marxism, right? This is redundant splits, not redundant splits, recursive splits is something that has been a long-time staple of the socialist community. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. This isn't just exclusive to morality either. It isn't exclusive to politics either. If we look at morality, we see. I said this isn't exclusive to morality because I was thinking about morality when I said it. But if we look at morality, what we see is this very distinct split between this deontologist, moral idealist framework and consequentialism. But I'm a consequentialist, so I'm more familiar with that side of the moral spectrum. But if we look at consequentialism, then we see the three main branches there: utilitarianism, nihilism, and egoism. Right? These are all sub-branches of the branch of consequentialism within the framework of morality, right? This is a entire umbrella, right? And then if we go even further up, we can have discussions on whether objective morality exists or whether all morality is subjective. This is fundamentally a misunderstanding on SDL's part. I really expected a lot more of him going into this debate. I think both performances actually could have been quite a bit better. But especially, I really think SDL needs to... I know this is a meme, but SDL needs to read some theory. Like unironically, he needs to read theory. Like, the idea that, like, Trotskyists and Maoists just don't exist is an outlandish one, right? It's clearly, like, way out there. SDL really needs to read some stuff to know what he's talking about, right? So
anymore. Or two,
I'm going to go back 10 seconds and we're going to listen to this second section again.
It's anarcho-primitivism. We need to destroy industrial society and return to monkey.
Okay, so SDL's second argument here then is that obliterating the proletariat is fundamentally primitivist. By destroying not just the workers, but also the means of production, we are then making our ability to pursue high living standards impossible, right? We're reducing the possible living standard, right? Instead of a middle class or even upper middle class in some cases lifestyle being possible for the proletariat, instead he's arguing that under downstream Neoteric Marxism, the standard of living is reduced. So ultimately, the argument that he's making here is that under downstream Neoteric Marxism, there is less wealth. Now, that doesn't sound so bad, but it actually is quite bad. The issue with that is that by this standard, all socialism is inherently primitivist. Okay? Capitalism, as bad as it is, does maximize, or at least close to maximizes, the amount of total wealth in the world. Most of that wealth is hoarded by the bourgeois, but it does almost maximize the total amount of wealth in the world. So, any socialist revolution, any socialist society that is set up, even without a revolution, is going to inhibit the production of some of that wealth, right? This idea that, like, under socialism, we would only have to work, like, 20-hour weeks. 20-hour weeks. Right, you'd only have to work like 3 8-hour shifts, I guess, right? Well, that'd be 8, 16, 24. That'd be 24 hours. But like this idea that you wouldn't have to work 40 hours a week under a socialist society is true, but it also means less commodity production. Less commodity production means less wealth, okay? So, although we are having, although we do reduce the number of hours you need to work per week under socialism, we are also bringing down the total amount of wealth in the world while we're doing that. Now, this isn't really a problem for most socialists because most of that wealth that's disappearing is going to come from the bourgeois. Although some of it the proletariat will see some impact on their lives as well. But this idea that, like, anything that lowers living standards is primitivist is just fundamentally wrong, right? Like, once again, by this metric, all socialism is inherently primitivist. You cannot bring about socialism without reducing the total amount of wealth in the world. Reducing the total amount of wealth in the world by SDL's standard here is primitivist. So SDL is merely advocating, well, he's not advocating, like, for primitivism. If anything, he's advocating against primitivism. But he's equivocating the two. He's saying that primitivism and socialism are... he's setting a standard at which all variants of socialism meet this threshold for primitivism. And then by arguing against primitivism, he's arguing against this straw man of socialism that he's set up. So while I think his heart might be in the right place, SDL is doing tangible harm to the left by making these arguments, by saying that primitivism is the same as socialism and primitivism is bad. He is in reality arguing that socialism is bad. And as much as I disagree with that take, that's undeniably what he's arguing for here.
Well, you predicted it. It's the other way of doing it. So yeah.
Okay.
So
I mean, so I don't even. Do I need to argue against like the downstream one, or is it just self-objectively like stupid? Or
I wouldn't say it's stupid. It's odd. I think.
why did you?
So, once again here, SDL is... This is what I alluded to just a second ago. SDL is setting up this straw man of primitivism. Then he's pointing at downstream Neoteric Marxism and saying, that is primitivist, and primitivism is bad. Therefore, downstream Neoteric Marxism is bad. The issue here is that you could literally, with the standard he set for primitivism, you could point at literally any type of socialism and you could say, that's a form of primitivism, that's bad, socialism is bad.
Use the term neoteric. I don't know if you named it, but whoever named it, why didn't they just call it neo-Marxism? Like, what's
Because
with the
there's already
neoteric?
something called Neo-Marxism.
Oh my god, why not call it like
Originally-
neo-Marxism?
That would have been epic, but we didn't think about that.
See, this is a failure of the central planning of the ideology.
It is.
Well, so I guess to me, the downstream neo-Marxism seems either like genocidal Posadism, not genocidal, like omnicidal Posadism, which is bad, or like anarcho-primitivism, which would de facto lead to like the death of virtually everyone. But
Well, not forceful. It depends. I'm not an N-prim, so I don't really know how all.
This isn't genocide. Primitivism is not the same as genocide. Does SDL even know what primitivism is? His two takes on primitivism so far has been primitivism is when the total amount of wealth is lowered, and primitivism is when everyone dies. These are two unbelievably stupid takes, right? I don't think there's any debate or anything on this, right? This is fundamentally a ridiculous take. It's just completely unreasonable.
That works. Yeah, I know plenty of N-prims, but
neoteric Marxism with Posadist characteristics.
yeah.
Yeah, what about super neo-Marxism? So do you have any thoughts on super capitalism? Super capitalism? You familiar with
Supercapitalism is bad and fascist. I'm not kidding. Look it up. It's on Wikipedia.
the meme?
I actually wrote an article on that.
Okay, all of these Vosh stands, because that's what they are. They're fundamentally Vosh stands. Are saying, haha, Vosh supports supercapitalism. We should all support supercapitalism too. Supercapitalism is a real thing that's doing real harm to the world, right? And it's fundamentally fascist in nature, right? I mean, unless you think that like Mussolini isn't fascist or something. Supercapitalism is something that like Mussolini invented, right? And so for Vosh and SDL and I don't know, probably Xander Hall. I don't know. I'm not familiar with his content enough to make any judgment on Zan's character. But for all of these online lefty streamers to come out here and start singing the praises of super capitalism isn't gonna help the left depart from this characterization of being associated with fascism that the right has strawmanned, right? You know, the whole like Antifa is actually fascist meme? Like, this notion of praising super capitalism is unironically perpetuating this myth. It is unironically exacerbating this notion that the far left, that socialists are fundamentally pro-authoritarian, pro-fascist conspirators. And I think that's a horrible myth to perpetuate, and it pains me to no end that the ones who are perpetuating it are themselves the lefties. This is horrible for optics.
Let me look at my medium. Where's my medium? Fucking. Actually, I'll send you.
Super capitalism, a paleo-Marxist plague.
Okay, super capitalism, while not necessarily paleo-Marxist, I definitely see where Shaw is coming from here. There has been a lot of support of super capitalism from people calling themselves leftists. Although there is a inherent conflict of interest here. Right, like, socialism and capitalism are mutually exclusive. You can't have both. So, socialists coming out here and saying that they support a fascist variant of capitalism is not just bad optics, but it's doing real harm to the world, and I want them to stop. Please stop. Thank you.
By
Yeah.
Nico. Yeah.
One of my names.
I have an article up here, by the way.
But there's also other ways of doing upstream Neoteric Marxism.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, we discovered what's the name again? It's the one in my bio. It's I don't know.
Also, Shaw, you need to learn how to use anti-aliasing right here, okay? Like, I admire the effort, but this would look a hell of a lot better if it wasn't all pixelated, okay? Learn to use anti-aliasing, okay?
What's his name? You Kalmopang? I don't know. Fuck.
Caleb Maupin.
Mopin Deng Tot. That's what I was saying. Which is
That sounds like a meme, man. What the hell is Maupin Dang Thought? I mean, I don't doubt that some of this is a meme, but like...
I'm not all that familiar with socialism with Chinese characteristics, and honestly, I'm not a huge fan of socialism with Chinese characteristics. So I don't have the expertise needed to comment on Mopendang thought, right? This is definitely something that probably needs to be talked about more. I admire Shaw for coming out and doing just that, but I can't really I can't really comment on the accuracy or veracity of these claims as someone who's not necessarily versed in these in this variant, I guess you would call it, of neo-Marxist theory.
well, Mopin
Branch, not variant. Branch of neo-Marxist theory.
talked about how we can infinitely create wealth. And so if you create infinite wealth, what happens is that you can redistribute the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And if everyone has access to the infinite wealth that Mopin is talking about.
This is something I disagree with Shaw on. Like I mentioned earlier, socialism fundamentally reduces the total amount of wealth in the world. The but that's not a bad thing. The advantages of socialism is that it uses the wealth that does exist much more effectively, so people can still maintain roughly their same standard of living, and two, it results in superior working conditions for the working class and for the proletariat. This this idea of infinite wealth is not something I'm too fond of, though once again it does stem from Maoist Deng thought, and that's something that I'm not entirely familiar with.
Well, it's the similar concept to a radical Yang thought, where
Right, radical Yang thought is something I'm much more familiar with. Radical Yang thought is the extension of a welfare state, right? The welfare state, in a lot of ways, has failed all of us. And so, by taking a more radical approach to this, through radical Yang thought, we can achieve something that's actually, achieves the goals of what a welfare state claims to want. That is redistributing wealth to those in society who really need it, and using that wealth in such a way as to bring about a better world, right? This is the promise of the welfare state. The welfare state didn't deliver, but this is something that we can do through Neoteric Marxism, as well as a few other variants of Marxism.
everyone suddenly has access to the means of production because they have the necessary wealth.
I mean, so like this just reads like so. The classic argument for like a Dengist approach is like, well, we need to.
Okay. I also had a note here. I think I missed the actual comment, so I'm gonna go back a bit. Okay, so Vanessir133 up here says this sounds like something JREG would make. Good eye. Neoteric Marxism is actually like this commenter's on the right track. Neoteric Marxism is the culmination of months of sifting and poring over theory done by the JREG stand community. So in a lot of ways, a lot of us who are so heavily invested in Neoteric Marxism, we came at this through JREG's lens of political satire. Now we don't want to get not taken seriously because of that, so it's not something that's brought up all that much. That's the same thing we didn't name ourselves neo Marxists, right? SDL mentioned that earlier in the debate. No, like that's bad. It's bad optics. People. Neoteric Marxism is a phenomenal idea, but people don't just convert their political ideals on the basis of how good an idea is. They also do it based on optics, right? And so you have to make yourself convincing. Naming a political idea neo-Marxism is not a good way to get taken seriously. The same thing goes with saying that you are fundamentally a product of a JREG community. And so that's why you don't hear about that a ton from Neoteric Marxists. But fundamentally, a lot of people who were disillusioned with the failure of liberalism and the subsequent failure of libertarianism wanted a path out, and so they were able to use JREG's very unique lens of political analysis, and they were able to use this to look over old theory with this new lens and really dig at what the heart of what Marx and Engels were proposing back when they wrote such works as like the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital and whatnot.
Is to the means of production because they have the necessary wealth.
I mean, so like this just reads like so. The classic argument for like a Dengist approach is like, well, you know, we need to screw the workers. We need high inequality. We need all the things that are associated with modern Chinese, not quite capitalism. We need all these things to build up the means of production. And then now that we've got enough means of production, we can do fully automated luxury gate-based communism. That seems to be like the Caleb Maupin thought here, that you just simply eliminate scarcity by having so much productive forces.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I guess I just don't. Yes, this guy, the Nya has a Twitter, which is.
I have a Twitter too. Maybe follow it. I don't know. Subscribe while you're at it.
I don't even remember where it was, but I think Anarchat or something.
Anarchat.
Yeah, Anarchat.
Because some French dumbass took Anarchat without the underscore.
So again, there's a comment here on the side. Joseph Willem says, doesn't his site say that all Marxist states are failures, including China? Why is he drawing from Deng? Because once again, I'm not an expert on Deng or Maupin, so like this isn't like an area of expertise from me. But it is worth noting, fundamentally, that just because someone's ideas don't work out doesn't mean that the core concepts that they employ can't be used to point the world in a right direction, right? Marx thought that we already would have achieved well, not just Marx, a great number of socialist and otherwise communist political theorists have long theorized that like we would establish socialism before the year 2000. And while they were wrong in that respect, that doesn't make their core ideas wrong. Modern China certainly isn't socialist, but we can draw upon the core ideals from people within that government, from people who helped to build that government, and use that to create a better version of that system within the future.
I guess, like, I don't... You said you wanted to, like, debate about this, I guess. So I'm not entirely sure. Like, the Neoteric Marxism, the upstream Neoteric Marxism, seems to be just equivalent to the classic arguments for, like, market socialism, more or less. That, like, hey, as you, like, do a lot of welfare, then eventually there's no more poor. And as you, like, tax the rich a lot and distribute their money out, then there's no more rich. And then now everyone's the same class.
It's not...
Wrong. Neoteric Marxism isn't about getting rid of the rich. It's about getting rid of a poor dummy. The fundamental problem here on why the on why socialism has not succeeded yet is that we keep supporting the poor people trying to bring about socialism. Like with Engels, who was fundamentally a member of the bourgeois, we need to draw alliances and, if not possible, then put ourselves in the position of a bourgeois. But we need to draw alliances with the bourgeois, and we need to support them. We need to support our comrades within the bourgeois, not only supporting our comrades outside of the bourgeois. And the core reason for this, of course, is that those within the bourgeois have much more power to bring about systemic change than those outside of bourgeois. Only supporting people outside of a bourgeois who try to bring about socialism is not going to go well. That's why we talk about needing like 80 or 90% of the population to overthrow capitalism, right? Like you need insane numbers of a population, which like no political or economic ideal, I guess in this case, has a 90% like support for it under a situation where it's still hypothetical, right? Like there are situations in which 90% of people support capitalism, but that's only while they're living under capitalism, right? In the feudal days, right, 90% of people didn't support capitalism under like feudalism, right? Because they weren't living under capitalism; they were living under feudalism, right? Most people are fundamentally going to be disillusioned with the status quo most of the time. Capitalism only ever achieved a 90% approval rating once people started living under capitalism, and saw that it was better than feudalism, right? And then they saw that as their two options: capitalism and feudalism. Well, capitalism's better than feudalism. I approve of capitalism. And people don't have a solid grasp of systems they don't currently live under. That's just the reality of how these economic systems work. So because of that, we're never going to get the 80 or 90% support we need to overthrow capitalism. As long as we only support the lower classes. By drawing allyship with those in higher positions of power, we only need like 20% of the population to be sympathetic to us to permanently change how the system works, right? If we get most of the bourgeois and a decent number of people outside the bourgeois, so like I said, like 20 or 30% to sympathize with us, most people don't really care as long as their living conditions aren't affected. As long as people aren't kicked out of their house, going without meals, having to walk to work or whatever, and not getting like their pay reduced, they really don't care about the economic system they're living under. So we only need 20 or 30% support, as long as that support is mainly consolidated within the bourgeois, and there would be barely anyone left to stop us if we have the bourgeois in our pocket. That's how capitalism has been able to perpetuate itself for so long. They go after keeping the bourgeois in their pocket, and we don't. That's why we haven't won the class war.
Not inherently welfare-based, but it can be, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, in radical Yang thought, clearly it's the UBI, but I don't think that there's any particular reason you couldn't do it with welfare.
I guess.
Well, so this is a misconception on radical Yang thought. I briefly touched on this earlier. Radical Yang thought is, through UBI, is built off of the premise that the welfare state had a good intent at heart, but that fundamentally it's a while the concept is good, they just suck at bringing it about, right? That this isn't something you could bring about with just welfare.
Like,
I guess you're right, yeah.
if instead of you doing UBI, the state gave everyone like a house and a TV and everything they would have bought. I don't know. Trundle-esque rise. I mean, I guess so.
All right, my dog was barking again. I don't really think she's listening to me, but she seems to have shut up. So here we go.
But like, I think on Twitter we had some disagreements, right? And I don't even remember what those were because I guess your old account got deleted. But
Is that true, Shaw? Is this your second account?
like as I recall, some of our critiques were about like market socialism. So I'm just not entirely sure what is there anything that we're disagreeing with about here? Like, what are you promoting here that would be incompatible with like the position that I'm promoting?
So market socialism, we covered this earlier. Market socialism, well, capitalism has a group of people who exploit and a group of people who are exploited. Market socialism seeks to make these two groups overlap, where everyone is being exploited, everyone is doing the exploiting, therefore basically no one is being exploited. You still have some minor exploitation potentially, but it seeks to drastically reduce the total amount of exploitation. By fundamentally destabilizing the how the bourgeois leeches off the proletariat like a parasite, by getting rid of that, we can fundamentally force the bourgeois to give up their ways, because there won't be anyone left to exploit. If we do this in a coordinated and synchronous way, we can overthrow the bourgeois much more quickly than we would typically expect in these more traditional methods of class conflict.
Honestly, I don't know. I'll say I knew nothing about Twitter. Okay, I'm gonna be really honest. I just added you on Twitter at like 1 a.m. because it was like a late night delirium. It was like, would it be funny if I debated socialism done left?
All the best decisions are made at 1 a.m. Some people will tell you otherwise. This is not the case. All of the best decisions are made at 1 a.m.
Well, it would be a good idea to quickly come up with something that we disagree on. Is to actually be a debate.
It would be.
I'm gonna grab some water, right? You've got a full 30 seconds, Maya.
Yeah, I'm gonna use my full burn.
Okay, so I skipped forward 25 seconds and he's already back, okay? This is what is known as a sneaky debate tactic, okay? Sneaky debate tactic. He says, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, only gives 25 seconds before he's back. What does this guy think he's doing?
All right, real talk. On the what is it? The Neo-Marxist Manifesto. Why does it look like you've got like a Nazball sign? Like, I think deal with it.
Once again, the sadists stole our idea of nuking people you don't like. Nazbol stole our flag. Okay, this is their fault, not our fault. Okay, it's not even that similar of a flag. You can see it right above my right up here, right? Like, this is not even all that similar to a Nazbol flag, right? But if you want to draw similarities between it and a Nazbol flag, like, fine. But, like, they're not all that similar. And if anyone ripped off anyone else, it was the Nazbols ripping us off, right? This goes back into bourgeois socialism, right? The idea of a dictatorship of the bourgeois that is supporting the bourgeois until they can crush the proletariat. This idea has been around since Marx and Engels, right? This we are not the inventors of this by any means. We are merely interpreting the pre-existing theory in a way that I think a lot of leftists have overlooked and have not properly considered.
I didn't do the I didn't do the flag.
Mm-hmm.
This is correct. We did not create the flag. This was actually this flag was actually discovered in a secret writing of Marx's. We found an old copy of Das Kapital, the second volume, and somewhere in there between pages 26 and 27, I believe, we found a rough sketch of this drawing. And we did not create this. This is precisely how Marx envisioned socialism would be brought about. Through the abolition of the lower classes, and specifically with this flag. That's how we got this flag. As far as we know, the actual injustice that happened here was the Nazguls stealing this flag from us, right? This flag is supposed to be a symbol of fighting for socialism through hijacking the bourgeois apparatus. And I think it's really unfortunate that we had this a symbol as core to our souls as this stripped from us by such a nefarious group of actors.
But basically, the flag is a blue flag with a hammer and sickle.
Oh, also, we disavow National Bolshevikism. Marxism is culturally neutral. Like if you want to be a conservative and bring about socialism, that's fine. If you want to be like a Nazgul, like I guess as a consequentialist, as long as we want to bring about the same things, like that's fine. But like also like we disavow. I have no association with any Nazguls.
The blue flag is to represent the bourgeoisie, and I don't remember what the symbolism exactly is because I didn't do it.
So the blue flag does represent the bourgeoisie, but it also represents progress. This is why the transhumanist flag has this dark blue color and black, right? The black is to represent anarchism, of course. This notion that liberalism and libertarianism have failed and that we need a more radical solution to bring about true freedom. And then this oh, my throat. Should have brought water. And then this the blue is to represent progress and moving towards a brighter future.
Some other that did, but I think their circle is to represent gentrification, and the hammer and sickle is to represent communism. I think the similarity with the Nazgul flag is coincidental.
So the similarity with the Nazgul flag is just because you want to gentrify everyone. So the fact that there's a wall around the Nazgul flag is just symbolizing that you want to fuck over the poor.
If you want to see it like that, sure.
Okay. Well, if you have anything else you'd like to talk about, I'd be happy to keep talking. But if this is a decent point to wrap up, we could do that as well.
Well, I think that it was a pretty decent conversation for the first time of me doing something like that.
So, summary of the debate. Shaw was clearly in the right here. As far as like theory and stuff goes, he should have been way more aggressive. He did have a little bit of a problem enunciating some of his or expressing, I guess, some of his points. But all in all, really the only problem here was that he didn't go aggressively enough. As far as socialism done left's part, SDL has a very poor understanding of theory, and I really hope he'll read up on topics like this more before attempting to debate anyone on this. I mean, I think we can all agree that he got blown out of the water here. Like, it was not even close, right? The only reason why this isn't like a top 10 debate fails list is like because like Shaw didn't go hard enough. He didn't go in for the kill. And while there's a time and a place for that, right? Like I admire people who aren't always argumentative. This was certainly the time and the place to go in for the kill, to establish the dominance of Neoteric Marxism. You are presenting this right in front of his audience base. You have a very significant opportunity to create change within his audience base, and I think you should have taken advantage of that more.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't think this through at all. So,
Well, maybe next time we could have a little bit more substantive disagreement. Thanks for hopping on. Is there anything? So this is Anarchat on Twitter, NRChat_. I posted it on Twitch.
All right, and that's the end. I have no further comments to add. I'm just gonna stop the stream here. I've been live for 75 minutes. I think that's probably good enough. I'll probably make a follow-up video at some point just to go over the more nuanced aspects of Neoteric Marxism.